what's new? There's a lot of new stuff under the sun. So let's go. According to the Bible's Ecclesiastes, verse 8, all things are wearisome. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. There is nothing new under the sun. Well, that may have been true back in biblical times, but it certainly isn't true today. Pick up any newspaper. By the way, the name newspaper tells you what you'll find in the paper. So here are two examples of new items I found in a recent paper. The United Auto Workers is striking for the first time all big three automakers. NASA will join forces with citizen groups to look for unidentified flying objects. I'm sure you can find many other examples. So when someone says there's nothing new under the sun, what might they mean? Probably this. When considering the human condition from a broader philosophical point of view, things change so slowly that it seems like there's nothing new. However, that depends on the length of time under consideration. And today, there's so much happening that it's not necessarily true that there is nothing new. Let me mention an article or a couple of books that say so. A recent Saturday Wall Street Journal article titled "The Cosmologist's Craft" tells us about the latest theories found in quantum or high-energy physics. But the writer also says that these latest theories that they're coming up with might be too far-fetched to believe. And it also says a growing number of scientists agree. Physics today has become more a religion than science because its fanciful mathematical models can't be tested. The images coming back from the James B. Webb telescope are nothing more than a computer simulation. But unlike physics and mathematics, where even the smartest have bumped into the brain's asymptotic limits, neuroscience and biotech, psychology, sociology, and economics are still so new that the scientists and academic researchers are far away from their asymptotic limits. I just read a 2023 book authored by Ben Stanger, giving lots of details why this is so. The title is "From One Cell, A Journey into Life's Origins and the Future of Medicine." Here are some of the main points he mentions. The discovery of DNA opened the floodgates for biotech breakthroughs, such as recombinant DNA, CRISPR gene splicing, in vitro fetus growth, genetically modified organisms, cultured meat grown from animal cells and shaped into chicken strips, marbled steaks, and hamburger patties via 3D printing, stem cell therapy by injecting them into specific organs, and cancer drugs tailored to a person's DNA. And in computer hardware and software, there are so many new developments using neural network hardware and software, big data, and ChatGPT empowered AI. ChatGPT, artificially intelligent software. Just about every day you read or hear about these kinds of developments in the papers or on television and radio. And a concept that you hear talked about more and more because of the above is emergence. Emergence occurs when a sufficient number of units, such as cells or neurons or computer circuits or software elements, interact by exchanging information. And from this grand canonical, a new phenomenon emerges. Neuroscientists tell us that cognition, feelings, and emotions are emergent processes coming from the interaction of billions of neurons making trillions of connections in our brain. In other words, there's no preformed homunculus or tiny human being in developing cells or in our head. In our head, it's sometimes referred to as a spirit or life force. This outmoded theory is called preformationism and has been replaced by epigenetic emergent processes controlled half by DNA and half by the environment. And if you want to read a fanciful book explaining what our brains can think up, take a look at physicist Sean Carroll's book, The Big Picture, on the origins of life, meaning, and the universe itself. In the realm of psychology and sociology, researchers extend the concept of genes to memes, which are cultural properties analogous to genes. And these memes are passed from one generation of a culture or civilization to the next and can cause social change and evolution. So our cultural world is always changing, and there are always new things, sometimes happening faster than us humans are comfortable with. And I'll end this podcast by summarizing why human intelligence and understanding have asymptotic limits. It's based on the facts of neuroscience, and here's a summary. Our brain can't handle too much complexity. We can't juggle or multitask too much at once. And our cognitive self is uncomfortable dealing with infinity. George Cantor, the mathematician who invented a way for using set theory to create all numbers, even the number infinity and beyond, ended up in a mental institution. And although all of us can think, we think with words, which stand for things in a language, and according to the linguist and mathematician Ludwig Wittgenstein, all languages have built-in errors and inconsistencies. He and Bertrand Russell knew this and worked in the early 20th century to eliminate this from mathematical logic, but they failed. Here's one way to state what is called Russell's paradox. Consider the set of all possible sets of objects, and from that set, form a subset that contains the set that, whose elements don't contain themselves. Now ask this question. Does this subset contain itself? If it doesn't, then it does, and if it does, then it doesn't. That's the paradox. W.V. Quine, the great 20th century logician and philosopher of science, tried unsuccessfully to eliminate these kinds of paradoxes by restricting the language to eliminate self-referential statements. And Kurt Gödel's completeness and incompleteness theorems sounded the death knell. These theorems say that there are true mathematical statements we can't prove, and statements we prove that may be false. And when you add all this to the explosion principle, which is a theorem coming from logic that says if you make an assumption and then later on somewhere you make an assumption that negates it, you can prove anything. And that tells us we end up knowing nothing. In other words, there are limits to what we humans will ever know. But we can always make incremental progress by finding something new that moves us asymptotically closer toward a limit, even though we never get there. And we'll feel good by making even a little progress because we hope that somewhere in the future we may learn or find out something that breaks through the limit. A recent Scientific American issue told about a seminar attended by physicists and philosophers that discussed whether consciousness is part of the fabric of the universe. Please leave worrying about asymptotic limits to philosophers and physicists. Our modern lifestyles give us plenty of more important things to worry about. So that's a wrap for this podcast.